Churches in Auckland are begging their mayor and councillors to be their saviour, or else they say their recent biblical rates rises could force them to close. Churches in New Zealand are rates exempt by law. Any building used primarily for religious purposes is. But after an Auckland Council review of rates exempt properties, some churches have been slapped with rates rises of around 6,000 or 7,000%. Yes, you heard that figure correctly, 6,000 or 7,000. The operational arm of Auckland Council says it legally can't reverse its decision. So now churches are begging the political arm for a reprieve. Zach Fleming has more.
So our bill is going to be $11,500.
St Matthew's in Auckland CBD's bill, it's gone up from $218. That's an increase of 5,679%. And that's not even the biggest jump. A nearby church went up from $400 to $28,000. That's a nearly 7,000% increase. Vicar of St Matthew's Helen Jacoby says that bill would cripple the church.
In order to afford that bill, we would have to not do maintenance on a Category 1 historic building, which we look after for the people of Auckland.
It's come from a council review of all non-rateable properties. Any property in New Zealand used principally for religious worship is rates exempt. The council's review identified 402 churches that the council says are clearly using part of their land for business purposes. In St Matthew's case, that's its office space underneath the church.
And of course the offices are used for the administration of the worship building, so in our mind they are used therefore for religious purposes.
Obviously, where we are now, the main part of the church that's used for worship, the council deems this to be used for religious purposes, so it's exempt from rates. But if you walk down the stairs at the back of the building and into the church's offices, this area isn't rates exempt anymore. Even though the church says that the offices are used for administration purposes for the church, they have to pay rates on them now. Auckland Council says the offices are 6% of the land, so the church has to pay 6% of what the property's rates bill is. So this all raises the question, what about things like bathrooms? A bathroom isn't used for religious purposes, so should a church have to pay rates for its bathrooms? For St Matthew's, that's a no, and Auckland Council is standing by its rates assessments. Head of Rates Debbie Acott says the council signalled this was coming and has sought both internal and external legal advice to check whether it can charge churches rates in this way.
We are going with what our legal advisors have told us, so the portion used for religious purposes, religious worship, is considered the portion just used solely for worship.
So you've extensively sought out whether you can. Have you thought about whether you should?
We just have to comply with legislation. So I don't think there's been any case law on this so far, but this is the advice that we've received.
So the only way to stop these new rates bills is a last-minute political reprieve from the mayor or councillors.
They can decide whether or not there is a policy on top of that to give some relief to different sections of the community. So over the next few months, our finance policy team will be taking some papers to the Finance and Performance Committee to see if they would like to do that for churches.
Manurewa Papakura Ward Councillor Daniel Newman wants the rates changes reversed. Otherwise, he says churches in his area
would simply not be able to provide the very important services that my community needs.
What are those kinds of services that the churches
provide?
Well,
churches in my neck of the woods provide food banks, counselling services for people with addictions, support for refugees, values-based education, really important services that are intrinsic to the community that I represent, intrinsic to the people of Auckland, I'd suggest.
Mr Newman says the decision should have been a political one, not an operational one.
No decision had been taken at a political level. There had been information about a review, but no decision had been taken. That the invoices had simply been sent out, and that obviously those of us from the elected membership side of the council are asking questions as to why this has happened.
We asked the Mayor Phil Goff for comment. He wasn't available. Churches have been advised they don't have to pay the first bill due on Friday until councillors and the Mayor make a decision. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.